Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Coffee with the Legislators. My name is Carter Fong, and I'm the Executive Director of the Dickinson Area Chamber of Commerce, where we aim to connect business and community with our elected and appointed officials because a well-informed public is in everyone's best interest. We appreciate the chance to get to know them in a meaningful way because we understand that this is not possible in many larger cities and states. As we begin, we would like to thank our hosts at the Dickinson Area Public Library, along with our sponsors for the day, including Deb Nelson and DLN Consulting. Thank you for supporting this series. Consolidated. Let's also add Baker Boy as a sponsor, pastries on your way in, and McDonald's coffee. If you were counting on me making you a hazelnut triple shot latte, I'm sorry, but we do have great McDonald's coffee today. Please note that today's event will be recorded and rebroadcast on Consolidated Channel 18 and on the Chamber's YouTube channel, and as you do so, we would request that you would silence your cell phones at this time. Thank you. As Dickinson's population has grown, so has this series. While District 37 is entirely within Dickinson city limits, nearly half the population of District 36 now resides in the city of Dickinson as well, while District 39 covers the western edge of Dickinson out to the Montana border. Our elected and appointed leaders have constituents here and elsewhere, but they have chosen to be here today, and we appreciate their time. Today's event features the following: from District 36, Representative Dori Hauck; from District 37 and the House Republican Majority Leader, Representative Mike Lefor; from District 39, Senator Greg Kessel; and with the State Investment and Legacy Fund, Jan Murtha. During the first hour, we will invite each of these individuals to update us on their work in Bismarck. During the second hour, we will open the forum up to public questions and comments, limiting to 3 minutes per individual, and we will conclude by 12 noon. I would have said let's begin with District 36 and go upward from there, but we know Dori Hauck navigated some difficult roads. She snuck in here at 9:59, and I had told Mike Lefor at 9:57 that he was going to bat first. So at this time, please welcome our House Majority Leader, Representative Mike Lefor.
Well, thank you, Carter, and welcome, everyone. It's good to be here. It's been a busy first week. A lot of things lining up, getting the bills into committees and getting the committee hearings going. There's been quite a few already, and so we're off to a pretty quick start. What I wanted to do to start with, I want to give each one of you some information on how to access the legislative website, who your local representatives are, things like that, so you can know who they are. Now, today with us, Representative Dori Hauck, Senator Greg Kessel, and then Representative Ty Dressler from District 36 is also here with us this morning. So I'll talk about the legislative website for just a moment. If you go to NorthDakotaLegislativeAssembly.com, you will click on the 69th Legislative Assembly, and it just gives you just a tremendous amount of information. It's very easy to navigate, to go through it. It has you click on the regular session, you go through the membership, you can find out who your legislators are, their contact information, all kinds of things. The committees that they're on for the regular session, and the individuals who represent the 3 districts that are here today basically serve on 7 out of 10 policy committees, which is great coverage for this area. I mean, education, finance and tax, industry, business and labor, human services, agriculture, transportation and energy, and then Senator Dean Rummel just joined us. So Dean's here as well. And if you want to know when a bill is being heard, the first thing I would do is go to the topics index. So if you're concerned about animal agriculture, type that in, and it'll bring any bill that might pertain to that. And then from there, you can find out what the bill number is, what when the hearing will be on those particular bills, and so forth. You can find out if it's in the House or the Senate. And again, like I say, you can listen to the committee hearings remotely. You can go to Bismarck and testify. You can stay off the icy roads and stay at home and watch. You can also submit testimony online. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of transparency for the public on behalf of the North Dakota State Legislature. The bill and resolution information, as I said, the major topics, the things that you might be interested in. The bills and resolutions, if you are absolutely bored and have nothing else to do, you can go through all of those. There's probably going to be a record number of bills and resolutions this time, and so a lot of work ahead of us. Bill tracking system, if you go to a certain bill number, again, it'll show you who the sponsors are, the content of the bill, the committee hearings, and where to submit testimony and so forth. It will also have the journal, the daily journal of the House, the daily journal of the Senate. What did the House do on the floor that day? What bills did we vote on? What bills did we move from amendment to the main floor? And what are the roll call votes? And a new feature, I don't think we had it last session, although I could be proven wrong, but we are now going to be able to provide roll call votes in committee. So you'll be able to see all of that information as well. So we keep doing everything that we can to make the process as transparent as we possibly can. And it also has a section on testifying in front of a legislative committee, and whether you're a lobbyist or not a lobbyist, everyone is welcome to testify in the North Dakota Legislature. And then I provided the email addresses for the legislators from District 36, District 37, and District 39. We do get quite a few emails every day, but we really want to hear from you. And that's why this is a great opportunity. I enjoy coming back to legislative forums, having the interaction. What's on your mind? What are you hearing? What would you like to have us think about doing differently? Quite frankly, I've gotten some good ideas when I've come to these forums. So this is a two-way street here. We certainly want to hear what you have to say. And as far as the committees are concerned for the local legislators, Representative Dori Hauck is on education and is also the vice chair of agriculture. Representative Dressler is on finance and tax and transportation. Now, the first committee that I list is their A committee, which is the committee they're on for Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, A committees. B committees are Thursdays and Fridays. Representative Keith Kempenich is the vice chairman of appropriations, and he is also on the government operations subcommittee of the appropriations committee. Representative Mike Schatz serves on industry, business, and labor, and on transportation. I serve as the majority leader, and I'm chair of delayed bills. Senator Van Oosting is on human services and energy, and Senator Kessel is on industry and business and is the vice chair of energy. So a lot of leadership and committee coverage here on these three districts. And as I said before, Legislative Council, last session we heard 990 bills and or resolutions. We expect that to be far higher, although we never know. The way the situation works here in North Dakota is that if I have an idea and I want a bill draft, I am assigned to a member of the Legislative Council team. And Legislative Council is the accountants, lawyers that serve on behalf of the Legislative Assembly. And so if I bring a bill on animal agriculture, what have you, that's just between me and the Legislative Council. No one else knows what that bill draft is about unless I share that. So that makes it a tremendously reactive way of doing business. And we've got some bills coming forward that hopefully change some of that. But right now, the deadline for introducing bills in the House is January 20th, and in the Senate, it's January 27th. So we still have a lot of bills that we, even as leadership, we've not seen, and we don't know about them at this point. So when the different topics that I'm talking about today, I want to give you a little bit of a background in a lot of these areas, and at the end, I'm certainly willing to answer questions or enter into dialogue to get ideas from you. Obviously, tax reform is at the top of the list based on, the measure for 37% of the people voted for it, 63% voted against it. But I still am a firm believer that there should be skin in the game on behalf of local citizens. I'm a strong believer in that. It's your fire department, your police department, your roads. We should have skin in the game. But some of the concepts that are out there right now provide for caps on spending or for political subdivisions. There's a bill out there that would look at providing property tax credits, the one that Representative Mike Nathy is bringing forward. And I have to give a lot of credit to Senator Dean Rummel. He spent a lot of time in the last year and a half researching the property tax issue, and has just done a remarkable job of getting a lot of ideas to other legislators. The governor's proposal is, and basically we'd worked with Governor Armstrong before he was governor. We provide a lot of this to him, and his staff did put some ideas in as well. But the tax credit would be $1,550 on primary residence. So when we look at property tax credits, the one thing I think that needs to stand more important than anything else, and that is sustainability. Can we continue this? Can we grow it? Right now, we're betting a lot of our future on the price of a commodity. And I don't think that's a great place to be when you're trying to budget for long term. So what is happening now, if for the $1,550 tax credit, that would be at a cost of $483 million. Of that, $310 million would come from the general fund, $173 million from the legacy earnings fund. And OMB provided a 12-year forecast for us, and it's based on $60 a barrel oil, keeping the production at 1.1 million barrels per day, and assuming a 6.5% rate of return on our investments. And if that would hold true by July of 2037, we would have over $30 billion in the legacy fund. The monthly, and he kept it flat for 12 years. But if that were to be the case, the monthly deposit from the legacy fund would be $62.5 million. The earnings would be $166 million every month. So that's the value of patience. That's the value of working so that this idea proves to be sustainable over the long term. And the idea or the concept behind this is that how can we take this so that down the road it uses zero general fund dollars? Right now, there's, as I said, in this particular bill that I was talking about, there's $173 million from legacy earnings. Well, in one biennium, if it holds true, let me look at this real quick, it will be over $310 million. So just 2 years away, it's going to add another about $150 million that can be used for this particular property tax credit. So we're talking about a legacy property reform bill. And at the end of, I believe, 10 to 11 years, that figure, which is now $173 million in the legacy earnings, would be $1.3 billion. So future legislatures could increase that property tax credit. So right now, $1,550, using those figures that I just gave you to the $310 million, that would accelerate it to $2,000 every year, property tax credit. And it can continue to grow from there. Again, if we have the patience, we don't want to rely, we've had oil boom busts, and for some of you that, a lot of you aren't as old as I am, but I've been through several boom busts in this, to the point in the 1980s where bankers said that one of their criteria for giving a loan was if you had a repossession or foreclosure, they wouldn't give you a loan. Then it got to be the point, if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be giving out any loans. Because I think those of you that lived here in the mid to 1980s certainly remember how tough it was. So we don't want to base our future on a product that is has global competition and is not a price that we are able to set. There's other bills out there. One is to buy down 60 mills of property tax. In other words, years ago, the legislature, out of 185 mills, took over basically 115 of those, leaving 60. Some school districts have more than that, but that's because their local voters voted to approve that. But there is a concept out there for that, per square foot. So we don't know the content of all these bills, and that's why we want to have the patience. We want to be able to vet these bills, and that doesn't mean if one bill is passed that we can't say, you know what, that's a great idea, let's add that to the mix. So if we don't know until January 27th what all the bills are going to do, it's going to take a little bit of time to properly vet all of those. The other component to the Representative Nathy bill is $70 million. So it's a total package in the tax credit of $483 million, $70 million in the homestead tax credit for $553 million. That'd be the biggest increase in property tax relief in North Dakota state history. Right now, the legislature provides $1.8 billion toward property tax relief. This would take it over $2.3 billion. In the homestead tax credit, it's based on income. It's based on the value of your home. Right now, we're looking at expanding that to a higher rate of income in a higher home value to get more people to get that homestead tax credit. And the average homestead tax credit, I think in the last biennium, and Senator Rummel can certainly easily say, no, you're wrong, but it was about $1,300. Oh, I was right, I'll be darned, 1 out of 1. So if we have patience, we can do this, and we can do it very well. And I always cite what North Dakotans have done in the past, and that's the Common Schools Trust Fund. To think about what our ancestors did in 1889 to put dollars in basically what acts like an endowment has now grown to over $7 billion. So of the total cost of K through 12 this biennium, that fund will provide $500 million toward the cost of K through 12. That means the North Dakota taxpayer will never have to pay that amount. When I was first elected to the legislature, that was $350 million. So you can see over time that dollar amount continues to grow. So we're blessed. We have the natural resources that help make that possible. Then the Legacy Fund. That has grown to, I believe, over $12 billion at this point. So if you have 6.5% rate of return on $12 billion, do the math. Those are big numbers. And that's going to accelerate. Another good move by North Dakota voters. The legislature put Measure 3 on the ballot this last November. What that ballot measure did, the legislature can, with the vote of 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and the signature of the governor, take up to 15% of the principal of the Legacy Fund to spend. I have yet to visit with a legislator that has ever wanted to spend a dime out of Legacy Fund principal. I don't think you will. I mean, I can't imagine the scenario. But that 15% was put in at the beginning. So now with $12 billion, 15% of that is $1.8 billion. Now the voters took that down to 5%. So that difference can now be invested in the longer term, accelerating earnings. Another great move. So give yourselves a hand. It's great. Workforce. Let me finish that tax thing. Renters credit. That renters can also, based on income, currently can apply for a renter's credit of $400. That would grow to $600. Workforce. The Commerce Department, last session, we funded a Department of Immigration. That is I'm going to have a special shout out to Cardinal Glass in Fargo. They have 200-300 employees. I don't know the exact number. But virtually all of them are not from the United States. And you get a tour of that place, They're from Ethiopia, they're from Iran, they're from Russia, they're from all over the place. And you can have a group of 12 people in one room, and none of them speak the same language. But it's a tremendously effective organization. It's led by a former Army Ranger who's very disciplined and very focused. But they wouldn't be in business if they didn't have that. They've told me that. So North Dakota is one of the leading states, if not the leading states, in migration. You have states like California, New York, that are huge up migration. So that's why we need to keep doing what we're doing. The philosophies that we've embraced have worked. Lower taxes, less regulations, a pro-business environment. It's successful, it's working. Plus, that God gifted us with an abundance of natural resources. Education. I know there's bills on school choice, and they'll call it educational enhancement opportunities, where there's a marketplace where parents can go on. Let's say they believe that their child needs extra education, whether it's Sylvan Learning Center, whether it's the Center for Distance Education, all kinds of different things, giving parents more opportunities. Career and tech academies are just exploding across the state. If you haven't been to our local career and tech academy, you're really missing out. It's phenomenal. It went from nothing in 2019 to a huge success now. And one thing that really excites me is the fact that they have all of this working together with the private sector. The private sector has provided a lot of equipment and dollars to fund this, and it's providing an opportunity for members of the private sector to serve on the board of the CTEs and provide scholarships, and so a lot of good things happen with CTEs. K through 12, same thing. Doing all we can, North Dakota University system. How can we make sure that the training, that the education that they're getting hits the target market of the workforce of the future? And right now, our Career and Tech Academy is providing CNAs, CDLs, heavy equipment operators, healthcare, culinary, diesel and auto mechanics, and they can go directly from high school to a career. And to me, that's just phenomenal. We know from statistics, labor statistics, that Generation Z and millennials will take up about 75% of the workforce in just a few years. And these are different cats, and I always say that to my son, you're a different cat. They're not going to stay at a career for 30 years. They're going to look at 5, 6, 7 jobs, or even more during their careers. They're going to want to work from home. They're going to say, well, I'll work from home, or I'll work from at work, or a hybrid thereof. And we know the working at home. We know the hybrid has exploded. And in a lot of private sector, they've got employers have to be amenable to that type of thing, or they're not going to have employees. That's the reality. Cash management study. Last session, the legislature put forward a cash management study of the state, and it came out with a lot of great ideas. I've now put a bill forward to have a cash management group get together to basically, during that process, they identified areas where we can do a better job of identifying the cash needs of the state, whether it's a short-term need, it's an intermediate need, or a long-term need, and then invest the dollars accordingly. So what my bill is going to do is provide funding for technology to the state treasurer to be able to identify those much faster than we're able. I heard Senator Kessel is going to talk about Highway 85, so I'm not going to talk about that. But the one thing that I will say is the TR library, when I was talking to those people, and I know I'm getting way past my 20 minutes, but I'll try to wrap up. But the TR library has set an aggressive goal that in its first year of operation, they'd like to have 190,000 visitors, which is aggressive. But even if it was 150,000, 120,000, that's a lot of people coming through on our highways, coming from Mount Rushmore to the library to Yellowstone Park, a great tourism corridor. Water, I will say that Southwest Water, in my time during the legislature, has just done an outstanding job of planning for the future, knowing what the future needs are, and communicating that message to the legislature. Roads, we created a flexible transportation fund that identifies specific projects throughout the state. We're the beneficiaries of one of those. So I think it's 107th Avenue, east of town, now connects to around the hub and so forth. A nice corridor. That's about a $7.5 million project we're able to get. So there's about 60-some projects across the state that were beneficiaries of the Flexible Transportation Fund. In addition, we increased the dollars available for matching funds from the federal government. So how can we leverage federal dollars and cover as many roads as we possibly can? Overall, we're number 2 in the quality of infrastructure in North Dakota. That's because we've made tremendous investments in that. But I will tell you that there's the last figure that I heard, we need over $10 billion in the next 10 years for roads and bridges and water and so forth. And that's a good problem because we're a growing state. Townships, there's an urgent need for roads in townships. A lot of roads are getting pretty dangerous out there. But these townships are so small, they don't have the tax base to be able to afford to upgrade their roads. Behavioral health, we need to get more behavioral health professionals to handle the growing demand, whether it's in schools, law enforcement, healthcare. I will say that we're able to get funding for a community-based behavioral health clinic right here in Dickinson. But my understanding, it takes a few years to get it up and running, so I'm really, really happy about that. We did invest dollars in something called AvilCare, which is a South Dakota-based company that allows access to behavioral health professionals through law enforcement, whether it's in the police vehicle, sheriff vehicle, they can bring it up on their computer, and if there's a situation that's escalating, they can get a behavioral health specialist right in there with prescriptive authority. Animal agriculture. Last session, we were able to work with Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, Stockman's, I mean, just about every ag organization you can possibly think of, because we have restrictive ownership laws in the state. But as a result of that, we've got 2 dairy herds moving to North Dakota. It's a direct result of that. The people that are moving here from Riverview Dairy told us that. 25,000 herd in Hillsboro, 15,000, I think, are in Abercrombie. But we have so much more to do. We're very low in dairy and beef, cattle, and hog production in the state. We're going to continue to work hard to, last session we reduced or eliminated 50 red tape regulations, and we want to continue to do that. Due to legislation passed in 2021, 20% of the legacy fund is to be invested in North Dakota. We have Jan Murtha here to explain that a lot better than I can, but there's a lot, for that amount, if you're at $12 billion and 20% is $2.4 billion, it's a lot of money, and there's not a lot of projects that go to the scale that's needed to be able to utilize those funds. But there are some. I mean, you talk about Rainbow Energy that basically saved the coal plant, Grand Farm, Grand Sky, just to name a few. And then, as a state, whether this is the legislature or whomever, we need to do all we can to upgrade the electrical grid in this state. We need to get the more natural gas pipeline going across the state, because now we're flaring some. We don't want to flare any natural gas. So if we can get that to where it's being utilized, especially in smaller communities that now use propane, that's important. Plus, if we don't flare gas, we can then get more oil out of the ground, because there are restrictions based on the amount of flaring that you can do. We have one other idea that we came forward with, and it was the OMB pool. And that was where Representative Glenn Bosch and I were in my office talking about what happens to an agency when an employee quits on January 1st and they don't replace until April 1st. What happens with that money? So we underfunded the agencies with, in that area. But so if I quit on January 1st and Senator Rummel replaces me on April 1st, they have to go through the OMB to get the approval for not the approval, but to get those dollars. And Representative Bosch and I were told that we had the Superintendent of Public Instruction and the Insurance Commissioner wanting to talk to us. I said, okay. So we go there in the House conference room, and it was virtually every state agency. It was an ambush. They were not happy. But as a result of this, and we don't know the final figures yet, but we believe that'll save between $30 to $40 million, putting more accountability in each department. So there's a lot of other things that could go on forever, and I think some people think that I have. But with that, I'll stop there and certainly hang around for questions or comments afterwards.
Thank you for having me. I'm not going to go down the tax road. My committee assignments are energy and resources and industry and business. And what I will say about it, you look around, you have a rock star in Senator Rummel working on your tax situation. So he needs to be commended greatly for his work on that. He's put a lot of time in that. I had a meeting several weeks ago. Carter was there. We talked about our Region 8, some of the economic development needs that we needed here. And I thought it was quite interesting that water became the #1 topic of stuff that we needed to address and how we needed to make that better, because the water situation isn't just for our rural people out in southwest North Dakota or for the entire southwest district here. It's also for our cities and our towns and our development in tourism, if you go to the west of us here in Medora. But more importantly, in my mind, it's for our industry development and our oil and gas development and stuff that we have here. Without that water and having that stuff put in place, this is the industry that has paid for a lot of this, and we need to expand on that. And we're finding out the importance of that. So this past week we sat and we listened to some reports from Industrial Commission, EERC, Bank of North Dakota, Game and Fish, Parks and Recs, all of these agencies that came to us, and every one of them that wants to develop in the industries we're in, it boils down to having a water resource there. What can we do with that? There's a bill being drafted right now that on the clean and sustainable thing that we're going to try to put the water resources on that committee. An example being what took place in Dickinson here with the Prairie Horizons project, which probably isn't going to move forward, but the fact of the matter is there was a lot hinged on that with water. So we need to keep taking a look at that. If we want to continue with the revenues that we create in the state, with so much of our money comes from the oil and gas industry, we need to embrace carbon capture, and not just carbon capture, but enhanced oil recovery. If we can continue doing that, the reports that we're hearing from the EERC, there is an extra 4.5 billion barrels of oil that we can go with the wells that are existing today that we can extract out of the ground yet. We wonder, are we going to have ongoing funding coming out of the oil and gas industry? We can if we play our cards right and we do things in the right manner. Some of the other stuff that, and it's not just how we move ahead and advance this. Some of the things that we do as well is pay attention to what's going on around us. And there was something that took place a couple of weeks ago, and I know some of the public knows about it, but I don't know if the general public really know the impact of the national monument, what that could have had. On the surface, that sounded like a great deal. National monument, first in North Dakota, we're going to do all this. on the surface, I think it sounded good. But when you impact 140,000 acres, twice the amount of acres that's in the Theodore Roosevelt Park, and that's the impact of that, and you would stymie all your oil and gas development, despite the stuff that came out in the news that said it wasn't going to stymie grassland management and the grazers, oil and gas and all the above, it did. Even the tribal nations came back afterwards and stepped back and backed off on that a little bit, because the realization, the impact could have been all the way over to them as well from that. We know it would have impacted Highway 85 project, and we've been waiting years to get Highway 85 done. And here we are at the verge of possibly getting this project, it's in our sights to get it done. We could have had an impact and it could have shut us down on that again. The other thing about Highway 85, you know, we sit and talk about the dollars that are coming from legislature. We have a Western area Legislators Caucus, and some talk has been around bonding for 85 and some bonding stuff. The reality is, if we would have built Highway 85 here, I think it was looked at maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when they looked at it, to today, when we kicked the can down the road, if we would have bonded that project when money was cheap, we would have saved about $300 million, and it would have been done, and we would have saved some lives that have been lost on that highway. It is an extremely dangerous highway, and we need to get that project done, and we do not need any more hurdles to get that done from a safety standpoint. Some of the other stuff we're talking about, of course, in Region 8, water was a big thing, housing, labor. Hard to get labor if you don't have housing, and you know, how do we move ahead with that? I know there's some programs on housing that are coming through. They're not necessarily in the committees that I sit on, but I listen to some of the guys talking about it, and it's extremely important that we get the housing situation taken care of. Transmission line electric siting. We're moving into a time and energy where it's oil and gas has got us where we're at, but we have this stranded excess energy in North Dakota, either from our coal-fired power plants or from our gas that's out in the oil fields. We can't get someplace with that, to even oil to a certain extent. Right now we're sitting pretty good on oil, transporting it out, but we're kind of at a low right now. But our gas numbers are going up, and we need to do something with our gas. And the idea of not in my backyard, no one wants pipelines, no one wants power lines, no one wants any of that. We need to address the siting issues when it comes to that. If we can't address it, that we can export it, how do we use it here, and how do we utilize that energy here? A lot of talk about gas-powered power in the oil field for data centers, not necessarily for crypto mining, although that is one of them, but also data centers out there. What can we look at with that? We're rolling into this new era of AI, which encompasses a huge amount of power. Is it easier for us to generate that power and utilize it that way and export our data? Or how does that look? How do we move forward with that? One of the very interesting things about these challenges that we have in our state is several weeks ago, a month ago or so, I was in Salt Lake City. I sit on the Energy Council, and a few of us go to that. And we were in Salt Lake, and the governor from Utah came in and talked to us, amongst others. And he mentioned multiple times, he says, North Dakota, they had the insight to do primacy. They've had the insight, I think they even mentioned the insight to do with their funding with the legacy funds, to reinvest that money in the state for the golden goose that's feeding it. We looked at primacy, how we manage that. We look at how we do our energy production if it's through horizontal drilling or enhanced oil recovery, how we're doing that, how we're managing our power plants and our power lines, and we're doing that. They were a net exporter of power not too long ago. They're in a situation right now with technology coming in. They need to be a net importer. They're turning away business because they cannot get enough power because of transmission or because of other things. And we're in a situation where we have an abundance of this. We need to take advantage of that, but we need to do it in a manner that is sustainable and is good for the environment. We're not going to go ahead and do it just because this is a thing to do. We need to do it right. And the general theme coming out from Energy Council is North Dakota does things right. Their people put the work into it. They evaluate the pros and cons of it. They look at it from an environmental standpoint on doing it right. They don't want to go out and they don't want to wreck their resources out there. And North Dakota was mentioned, I bet, through that whole conference 6 to 8 times, because we need to take a look at what North Dakota does. That's a testament to the kind of work and the insight that our legislators had prior to where we're at today. And it just says volumes when you're sitting there and you're listening to what these people are telling you about that. So, you know, we need to keep taking a look at this stuff and how we do it and do it right. Couple other things. One thing that I personally am really pushing forward right now, since we've had the wildfires this past year up in northwestern North Dakota, and we've dealt with them several years ago. We bought Lost City, Medora. We've had the wildfires west of over here at Belfield. We've had them over the years. After these fires took place up in the Northwest, Senator Pat and I were getting a lot of phone calls on, you know, how can we do things better? So we sat down and been having meetings with the emergency management people, with the state fire marshals, with the state Fire Chiefs Association, with all these people, and I'm wondering how can we respond and do this in a better manner, more efficiently and better. We got to remember in western North Dakota, and probably throughout the state, most of our fire departments are all rural. And with that comes volunteers. Well, these are the same people that make their livelihoods out on the land and do that. And when you have events of this scale and magnitude, we need help. And how do we get that help? So we're proposing maybe taking the state, make it in 8 regions, making leads in them regions to go to the state, to a person in the state, that if we need to get Blackhawks in from the National Guard, it's a matter of a phone call or 2, and we have Blackhawk helicopters that are flying and dumping water. Rather than having to wait, and in some cases you're waiting 24, 48 hours. In the instances of the fires like we had up here, you did not have that time to wait. And if anything should be an eye-opener for us in the state of North Dakota right now, look what's happening in California right now. We need to stay on top of this. We need to get ahead of this. We cannot. It was bad enough the way it is, and thank God our people in the state respond as well as they do, but we can still do better, and that's the proposal here. We need to somehow be able to do better, that it never gets to this point. One of the other legislation or bills that we're looking at right now is how do we work, because some of the fires were caused by power lines, some of them were caused by flaring, and there are some others that are undetermined yet. We're not exactly where they came from. But what we don't want to do in our state is we don't want to be an example in California that we take our power line people and tell them they can't do a lot of things, and then hold them fully responsible for everything that goes on. We need to mitigate that somehow. So we're proposing that they come up with a wildland fire mitigation plan, that they're able to put a lot of things in place ahead of this, that in the event that we have it, it's documented that they've done all this, and then they are protected from lawsuits and everything to go out. In the state of California, PG&E was one of the largest power companies in the US, and when they went after them, they broke that company. We can't have that. We need our power here. We need to work with these people. The same kind of mitigation we need to do with our oil and gas people. And we need to come up. They need to be partners in this with us, and they're all on board on this. So we're taking a look at this. To me, this is, if anything, after having the fires, which is kind of getting in our memory a little bit, but if you turn on the news and you see what's happening out there right now, we need to get on top of this. So that's one of my priorities right now, to do that. One other note on that. So we talked to emergency services, and how can we get more firefighters? We're in the rural communities. There's a lot of aged people, and you need to be young to fight fire if you're going to be out there. We have an asset here in Dickinson at the CTE Center. They're teaching firefighting and stuff like that. It's been proposed that maybe the program that's in Dickinson and I believe Williston, maybe in every CTE center across the state, that we need to go ahead and start teaching our young people at least the basics to get on board and how they learn that, because these are going to be the people that are going to be on the ground moving forward. And if they at least have the basics so they don't go out and put in harm's way, that's a path forward that we can give them that. We've also talked to the penitentiary about what's it look like if they had a group of people there, and what would that look like? I believe there's a television show on that sort, but it got brought up, and I visited with them the other day, and they're absolutely on board with that. And they have a group of people that they could have up that if we got in that situation, they could bust them out and get them out there and help us out in these situations. And shared fire departments around the state. So that is, in my mind, is especially when you got this stuff front and center, we need to act on that. So, in a roundabout way, I guess that's kind of in a nutshell a lot of what we kind of got going on in the communities that I sit on. So, thanks.
That is true. That yes, I have the most experience for District 36 right now, but it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. Just a little bit of background for you, for those of you who don't know me. I am a full-time rancher north of Richardson, and my husband Doug is part owner of Amber Waves. They make the hopper bottom bins in Richardson, and he also owns Signum. They are an electronics hardware manufacturing company right there in Richardson. And so I will visit a little bit about my committees that I serve on. Education. Leader Lefor did touch base on one of the bills. Again, we are very early in the session, so a lot of the bills haven't come through. So I don't know exactly what all we're looking at, but two things that I do know that we are looking at are going to be that education savings account, and where there's going to be a few dollars put in there for the student to decide where do they need a little bit more help, whether it's mentoring or a distance education course, the technology center, those kinds of things. They can choose where those dollars go, whether it's books for tuition, that kind of thing. The other thing that we are looking at is North Dakota does not allow right now for charter schools. And so all these opportunities, DPI supports, whether you're a public or a non-public school, they support you in making sure that you've got great teachers and great administration and that kind of thing. But right now we don't allow for charter schools to be built. So that is one of the other pieces of legislation, is to open that area up to North Dakota. Last session in education, we passed the science of reading, which for those of us my age, we all knew it as phonics. And so that's coming back to help our kiddos. We're right now, nothing to write home about. We're at like 35% proficiency for our kiddos. And so I think we can do better bringing phonics back in, and the science of reading back in, and getting them a little bit, doing better on that. So this session, they're going to be bringing a science of math, very similar concept, kind of going back to the roots of how math is taught. Leader Lefor, I appreciate it is an honor to serve in the legislature, and it's an honor that he actually helped place me into being vice chair of ag. So I thank you for that. I do have an ag background, born and raised in it, and so I'm excited to be there. A few of the things that came up so far have been kind of cleanup bills, language. I know some things about raw milk are going to be coming again to open that market up a little bit more to additional products like cheese, and I'm not sure, I haven't seen some of these things yet. It's so early. One of the bills that I will be bringing to touch on what Senator Kessel was visiting about with the National Monument, a movement from our federal government is to create what they are calling natural asset companies. And they are coming in through conservation easements, through national monument purchases, and a program that they call Rewilding of America, and they're tying up our private land into these companies where how do they figure out what the value is? It's based on photosynthesis and the air that's above the ground, so they're going to tie it up and not even let people walk on these lands. So to take it out of production, you can see again what's happening in California, in Canada, when you don't allow people to come in and graze some of those or manage it in some way, we're going to have a bigger disaster than some of these states are seeing or that we saw up there. I mean, that was a whole different situation in northern North Dakota, but that's their goal. So I am bringing legislation to not allow natural asset companies to come into North Dakota, make people more aware, all the agencies aware of what this is. So when somebody does come in with a conservation easement or a national monument type of project, they understand, read all the fine print and make sure that we're not being precluded from coming onto those lands and managing them with grazing or haying or any of those kinds of things. Completely out of the agriculture realm, another bill that I have the honor of bringing forth to the legislature is I was asked to honor a soldier from the New Salem area with a bridge naming. So about 6 miles north of New Salem, I'm requesting that the legislature approve a bridge naming for Dennis Furterer Jr., who was killed during Operation Iraq. And so I'm honored to do that for him. Another bill that is going to affect a lot of our small communities that do gaming is I'm going to be carrying a bill that will reduce the amount of tax being paid back into the gaming division or the Attorney General's division. Right now, it's about $22 million. Comes in with that gaming tax, and we're going to cut that significantly because it takes that department about $8 million to run. By reducing that, it puts that $11 million back into our communities so that they can go, fund their kids going to music camp or FFA camp or buy a fire truck, depending on, what your organizations use those dollars for. So I know that that's not, I made up for the fact that they took up a little extra time, so I'll be here for questions. Again, it's kind of early in the session, so I don't know exactly what's all coming. Even as Vice Chair of Ag, like Leader Lefor said, there are a lot of things that we haven't seen yet, but I again look forward to visiting with you, answering any questions, and thank you for the honor of serving for you in the legislature.
Thank you all so much. It's a pleasure to be here today just to set the bar. I am the least interesting person that you will hear from today. They are all far more interesting. And so before I launch into my presentation, I want to tell you and take the opportunity as I stand up here to say thank you to all of our legislators that are in the room, because for the next 4 months, they will be expected to know literally everything about hundreds of different issues. They will have people calling them 50, in excess of 50 people calling them, meetings every single day, and the work doesn't end in April when the legislative session does. They will continue to work throughout the year, meet with constituents, work on issues, and learn about things. It is a big ask, and I have to tell you from my own personal experience, all of our legislators in our districts out here in Southwest North Dakota, they answer the phone. Every time I've said, hey, I'd like to update you on an issue, they've made time, and that is not true everywhere in the state. So if you could all join me in a round of applause for all of them that are here today. Because they could be at home resting and they'd be entirely, they'd be absolutely entitled to it. So as I launch into this presentation, first I have to check, are you moving the slides or am I? I'll move. Thank you so much. As I launch into the presentation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, about my background, because it's relevant to some of the comments I'm going to make today. So I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law for more than 2 decades. I know, seems like you're probably thinking, oh, you don't look like you've been practicing. No, that's what I'm thinking, right? No. So I've been practicing law for more than 2 decades, and in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and North Dakota. I've worked for cities, counties, states. I've been in private practice. I've had my own firm. I have been involved in the government finance area about 3/4 of my career, so I got a good foundation there. From 2021 to last week, I was the executive director of the Retirement Investment Office. I'm beginning a new position in February with the Department of Financial Institutions. It's a new position for me, but it's also a new position for the state. It's Deputy of Non-Depository Division, and that's a long way of saying that I get to help regulate cryptocurrency, and I'm pretty excited about that. So it should be fun, but I'm not going to talk about cryptocurrency today. I was asked to talk about investments in the legacy fund and what the state is doing for all of us in the state. And when I was asked, when Mr. Warner asked me, I said, you know, I'm not going to be with that agency when you're doing these presentations. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but I got the distinct impression that you thought that was even better. So when I am talking to you today, these are my own, I'm not appearing here on behalf of any board, any elected official, or appointed official. I am sharing with you my personal and professional knowledge and opinions about what the State Investment Board is doing, how it's doing, what's happening with the legacy fund. So this is all my own opinions and knowledge and whatnot. However, if you would like to fact check me, and please do, I do have the source material cited on my slides for all the stuff I'm sharing with you today. So please feel free to do that. So, talk a lot. Sorry. So what are we going to cover today? Who is investing, how investments are managed, and that's a really hot topic actually. What's changing, and ending with how does this impact you? And I'm not talking about, why you might think this is a good idea or you should get behind a good cause. I'm going to speak to how this impacts you as an individual, as a North Dakota resident, what the State Investment Board is doing actually affects you in a very real way, but I'm going to do that at the end of the presentation, so you have to stay the whole time to get to that slide. So let's start. Who is investing? Yeah, go ahead. State Investment Board. So the State Investment Board has 13 members. It's a pretty large board. It's comprised of elected and appointed officials. It's got a couple legislative members. It was changed, the composition was changed in 2023 to actually add 2 appointees who are considered experts in institutional investing. One of them is a bank president. The other one currently is the department chair at UND, is an economics professor. And then the agency, the Retirement Investment Office, which is, again, where I worked, was created to coordinate the activities of both the State Investment Board and the Teachers Fund for Retirement Board. We're not going to be talking about teachers today. We're not going to be talking about the Retirement Investment Office so much. We're just going to focus on the State Investment Board. Next slide. Now, you would be forgiven if you had the impression that with the title like State Investment Board, that means that's the board that does all the investing on behalf of the state, right? Because that's what it says, that's the title. It actually isn't. So just to give you a good picture of all of the efforts of the state, because they are not small. The State Investment Board by far is the largest. It has over $23 billion in assets under management currently. But the Bank of North Dakota also does investing. They have approximately $10 billion in assets under management. The Land Trust Department has approximately $8 billion in assets under management. Commerce has a whole bunch of money. Just go to their website if you're looking for funds. They got so many programs, and the way they invest in the state is through economic development initiatives. And we could spend a day talking about everything Commerce does for the state and all the money that's available. I am going to take the opportunity, because I've been asked this many times over the last couple of years. So what's that Shark Tank guy doing with the Legacy Fund? I just want to clarify that if you're talking about Mr. O'Leary and the Shark Tank and his association with the Wonder Fund, that is a Commerce Department fund. That is not the Legacy Fund, which is managed by the State Investment Board. So just going to take that opportunity right now. So the Legacy Fund is approximately, and these are October numbers, so this is what's available on the website currently. The financial and performance reports get updated on about a 6-week delay, so we should be having December numbers, November and December numbers up there soon. But, it always grows, but I'm referring to, at the time, it was about $11.5 billion at the end of October of the $23 billion that the State Investment Board manages. So I'm going to jump over real quick. We'll go to the next slide. So just a real quick plug, because a lot of times when you hear State Investment Board, you think it's synonymous with the Legacy Fund, and that's all they do, and it's not. So the number of client funds that the State Investment Board serves is currently at about 29. It can go up or down, because any governmental entity within the state of North Dakota can ask the State Investment Board to use their services to invest their money. And of those 29 client funds, the Legacy Fund is by far the biggest, but there are 7 pension funds that the State Investment Board also manages, and they're listed here on the bottom. PERS and TFFR are the biggest. Amongst these, or across these 7 pension plans, there are more than 80,000 plan participants, either active or retired members, beneficiaries, inactive members who are eligible to receive payments, actively receiving payments. The pension pool of funds is approximately $8 billion. So of that $23 billion that we were talking about, $11 billion is the Legacy Fund, another $8 billion is the pension fund, and that leaves approximately, rough math, $4 billion for those other 21 funds that the State Investment Board is managing. So when we look at the population of the state of North Dakota, last census, 2023, it's approximately 800,000. Right? So if the State Investment Board is managing and investing on behalf of 80,000 plan participants, which are plan participants because they're working for plans for the state of North Dakota or its political subdivisions, it's responsible for the retirement security of about 10% of the state. Again, rough math, right? So it's an important job, what they're doing, and it's not just the Legacy Fund that's important. Next slide. Thank you so much, Carter. Appreciate it. How investments are managed. Here's where we're going to get into the technical part of the presentation. So there's 2 slides that are super technical, but I promise if we get past that, we're going to talk about really controversial stuff. It'll be fun. So how investments are managed. Client funds, so all of these 29 different client funds have boards or individuals that are responsible by law, by statute, for setting the asset allocation. And this is important, we're going to talk about what that is. And then they give that asset allocation to the State Investment Board, and the State Investment Board has to implement that asset allocation. Now, depending on the needs of the fund, these asset allocations can be completely different. Some of our smaller funds, and by small, I'm talking about $100 million or less, which doesn't seem very small, but is, are looking for a lot less risk, right? They want short-term instruments. They want it to be paid out quickly. Larger funds, like the Legacy Fund or the pension pool, that have a bigger pool of funds, are investing more long-term, and have payout obligations, that has a more diverse asset allocation, and we're going to talk about why that is. So the SIB implements that asset allocation to meet the client fund goals. The SIB does not pick the asset allocation for the client funds. So just want to give that as a foundation. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Legacy Fund. So I think we've talked a lot about it. You've heard a lot. You've heard the Legacy Fund mentioned by our presenters today. For anyone who is not aware of what the Legacy Fund is, it's a sovereign wealth fund created by the state. The purpose of the Legacy Fund, and it started accruing funds in about 2011. Why create this fund? To save a part of non-renewable resource to share wealth for future generations. It was genius. And it's North Dakota is one of the few states. There are other states who have a sovereign wealth fund. The fact that they're setting aside these funds for later use is really important and directly impacts you. So that's the Legacy Fund. And information on it is available on both the retirement investment website, as well as the state treasurer's website. Next slide, please. The client fund board for the Legacy Fund is the Legacy and Budget Stabilization Fund Advisory Board. That board, that client board, is responsible for setting the goals. That advisory board is almost as big as the state investment board. There's 10 people on it, 3 senators, 3 representatives, 2 elected officials, 2 appointed officials from state government. It is a large board. And what they have done over the years is gone out and get a consultant to help them develop an appropriate asset allocation for the Legacy Fund. The most recent asset allocation study is what we call it. Happened in over 2022 and 2023, and the policy was updated in 2023 because of the passing of Measure 3. It will get to be updated again in a positive way. So the advisory board creates that asset allocation, and that it's part of an investment policy statement. That document is available multiple places on the North Dakota Legislative website, the Retirement Investment Office website, the Treasurer's Office might even have it. The SIB implements and monitors and provides earnings based upon that asset allocation. And then once a biennium, that big check, that big chunk of earnings rolls over into the general fund to be appropriated by the state legislature. So when we talk about, I'm going to start using a lot of egg metaphors, but I really think about the Legacy Fund as the goose that lays the golden eggs, right? If we take care of it, we feed it, it will keep laying those eggs, and it will keep laying more and more golden eggs for us to benefit from in the future. Next slide, please. So the Legacy, so these next 2 slides, these are it. This is the most, I promise you, it's the most technical part of the whole presentation. And I'm going to embrace my inner nerd, and you're probably all thinking that we've known you were a nerd from the beginning. But I'm really going to lean into it. So the Legacy Fund asset allocation per that investment policy statement is up here. What you're seeing is broad U.S. equity, broad international equity, private equity, fixed income, private real assets, in-state investments. And why is it so diverse? I mean, that's a question a lot of people have. Like, why do we have to invest anywhere outside of North Dakota to be able to invest the Legacy Fund? And I'm going to also say this. Sometimes I get the question, there's this perception that the Legacy Fund is sitting in a bank account and isn't fully invested. No, at all times, the Legacy Fund is fully invested. Just those investments changed and get moved around as different commitments are made. So why do you do that? Why diversify? Well, I'm going to go back in time to the 1950s. And there was a gentleman who won a Nobel Prize in economics for putting forward this idea of modern portfolio theory. What is modern portfolio theory? I promise you is very relevant to our discussion today and perhaps pending legislation in the future. Modern portfolio theory says or recognizes that not every sector of the market does well all the time. I know this is shocking, right? Like, we're all surprised by this. But it changes, right? Like, the economy changes, it ebbs and flows, and different parts of the market do well at different times. So if you have a responsibility, if your fund has a responsibility to pay money out, you have to invest, but you're going to try to mitigate that risk. And you're going to mitigate that risk by putting your money in different places. So we've all heard of the phrase, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Because if that basket tips over, then all your eggs are broken, right? So you want to have a bunch of different baskets. to put your eggs in, so that even if one tips over, something happens in one sector of the market, it doesn't impact your ability to meet those financial obligations that your fund has. But you not only want to have a bunch of different eggs in a bunch of different baskets in a bunch of different sectors, you want to have them in a bunch of different places. Because if you say for example, back in 2008, if we had all of our investments just in the US, and what happened with the housing market in the US, well, would not have done very well, right? But it's not, it's diversified, right? It's in different parts of the world, because what you're relying on is that even if a basket tips over in a different part of the world, there's still enough baskets and enough eggs that you're going to be able to see a return on those investments, mitigate your risk, and be able to meet those financial obligations that you have. And one of the financial obligations the Legacy Fund has is to pay out those earnings, right? So I'm just going to really quick do this because it's so fun to say. So there's even this thing called vintage year diversification, and that's the idea that you have different baskets in different years. I just think it's so cool. So if you want to talk about that afterwards, I have to. But that comes into play when we invest in private markets a lot, because the private markets are a really interesting area, and not all opportunities are good every single year, so you want to pace it out. Okay, so what you're seeing here, that the asset allocation, which was approved by and put forward by the Legacy Budget Stabilization Fund Advisory Board and then implemented by the State Investment Board, has 19% allocated to broad international equity. So we got that base. All right, next slide. The asset class determines the investment type, right? So we had that list of the asset allocation that says, put your investments in these different spaces. Now, how do you know if an investment does well? Well, you know because of a benchmark, right? So if you've probably heard the phrase beating the benchmark. So if you're an active investor, you're going to try to beat the benchmark. And that means you get a good grade, right? If you're passively investing, then you're just trying to meet the benchmark. Well, how do you come up with these benchmarks? Market index determines what the benchmark is. So there's a whole bunch of different market index. You probably heard of the Russell 2000, the S&P 500, MSCI World Index. All these different indexes are created to be representative of different sectors of the market. So we're all together. I promise you this is the worst one, right? So asset class determines the investment type. You're graded on how well you do by that benchmark. The benchmark or the market indexes determine what the appropriate benchmark is. So you can't say you're doing really well when you're not doing really well, or if you know you're doing poorly, you know you're doing poorly because you're comparing yourself to apples to apples, so to speak. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get to the controversial stuff. We're going to talk about China, right? So this is a fun topic. I don't get to talk about it very much, but I get to today. So from the news, why China? There's been a couple articles specifically about the Legacy Fund, but a lot of articles, I think, over the last couple of years about why invest in China. Okay, so let me start with the legal framework first. And before I launch into it, I'm just going to tell you, full disclosure, my personal opinion, I don't really care. Honestly, on China, invest, don't invest, it's a public policy decision as far as I'm concerned. So that's my basis. But here's why there are investments in China, right? So if the asset allocation includes a dedication to international investments, right? And the index that you're basing or you're basing your benchmark on includes China, then that best benchmark, how you're performing, is based on that index. China is in the emerging market index. They're the second largest economy in the world behind the United States, all right? So that's why there's investments in China. Now, there's North Dakota has something it's not quite unique anymore, but was at the time. It was one of the first states to do this. It has a statutory prohibition on ESG investing. What is ESG investing? When you say ESG, people tend to think of capital E, and they forget about the S and G. ESG investing is this idea that when you invest, you are prioritizing something over returns, right? You're prioritizing environmental factors over returns, social factors over returns, governance factors over returns. Actually, our in-state investment program that we have is ESG investing. So there's an exception written into this rule in the law for the legacy fund, for the in-state investment program, because when you're prioritizing dedicating investment in a limited geographic area, you're capitalizing that S. That's a social priority that you're saying, we value this more than return, and so we're gonna make an allowance for this, right? So but what North Dakota did was put into state law a prohibition on social investment. That means that Jan Murtha, anybody on the state investment board, or anybody, the team members of the retirement investment office, or any of the external managers that we hire, they can't substitute their own personal opinion about what's a good investment. There is no discretion. They have to use the prudent investor rule and these market indices to invest. Now, whatever your feelings on China are, invest, don't invest, whatnot, because there has been, some people feel very strongly about this. If there's a law that says don't invest in China, don't invest in China. In all reality, and that's fine, and that trumps this, and it meets the other requirements of the prudent investment rule. If there is not a law that says don't invest in China, as long as China is part of the index, and there's an allocation to investing outside of the U.S., it's appropriate to invest in China, because to do otherwise would be substituting your personal opinions or discretion for recognized market preferences. Right now, that being said, all U.S. institutional investors, of which the State Investment Board is one, has to follow guidance from the U.S. Treasury, securities, whatnot. So our federal government, there's some things that they're responsible for, and one of those things is knowing what's going on with foreign powers, right? So they're the ones that are in the best position to know, hey, we should not invest in these companies, we should not invest in this area, and they will give that guidance to U.S. investors. I'm gonna give you an example, Russia, right? So the day before Russia invaded Ukraine, the day before, they were in the emerging market index. It was totally appropriate to invest in Russia, okay? The day after, actually within about 2 weeks, the U.S. comes in and says, U.S. investors get out of Russia, and they get kicked out of the emerging market index. It's no longer prudent and appropriate for a U.S. investor to invest in Russia. That's what happens, and that effort's led by the federal government, by the U.S. federal government, right? Now, states can come in and say, and a couple states have, it's my understanding Texas recently did, and there's I think, proposed legislation in a couple other states to say, okay, regardless of what the federal government says, we want to be out of China, and it's totally fine. It's a public policy decision. Yeah, you can have that conversation. So there's a 10% allocation to international. Approximately, China investments or China exposure represents about 2%, of the overall legacy. It's not going to have a huge impact, but you want to be very careful about how you phrase that, right? Because what do you mean by investments in China? Do you mean, what if McDonald's has, some places out in China? What if Apple is selling over in China? Right? Like, how far, when you say that, how far do you mean? What is the extent of that? So that's the really important piece of that public policy discussion. So if we move on to the next slide. So news, views, and rumors. This slide was more fun 2 months ago when no bills were filed. That being said, I did look late last night just to see if I've missed anything. And the reason I was looking is because there have been a couple of legislators who have issued press releases over the last couple months saying that they're going to propose legislation on divestment from China and legacy fund transparency. It hasn't been filed yet, from what I can see. Now, does that mean that it won't be? No. I mean, they've issued press releases saying they're going to, so I am assuming that they're going to follow through, and they have time over the next 2 weeks to do it. So we don't know what it looks like yet. I can't really comment on what it might be, what it might not be, what the proposed impact, could be. But it's something to keep an eye out for. And you want to be, it's an important discussion, right? And it's an important discussion because when we get to that last slide, which I promise you is coming, that last slide when it talks about how all of this impacts you as an individual, you want to be aware of it and involved in those discussions. So let me give you an example. Here's the problem with countering rumors and opinions, allegations based on opinions. The problem is words. When I say words, I often get told, Jan, you're too wordy. You use too many words. You spend too long trying to explain things. I don't know about you, but I grew up with parents who would use the phrase, because I said so. I hated that. And I made it my life's mission to never say because I said so. I want to give a full explanation, even when my kid says, why can't I have ice cream for dinner, right? Like I want to give a full explanation of why that is not a good idea. I'm going to give you an example of some of the things that have been written about, very scandalous things, that have been written that are not based upon fact, in my opinion. So, for example, there was an article that was issued by the Jamestown Sun a couple weeks back about Chinese investments. And to be fair, all they were doing was quoting what other people had to say. Now, I'm going to say this, and you will likely be scandalized, but I'm telling you, I'm quoting from the article. The Legacy Fund, it said, this person alleged, the Legacy Fund is investing in pornographic material. Are you scandalized? I am. 100% I am, because that's not true. I just want you to know that. That's not true. So what is true? It's a lot of words. Here's what's true. What apparently they were making that assertion based off of was this idea that in China, there's a company that's very similar to YouTube. It's a streaming service, and it has an anime cartoon that apparently the person asserting it thought was a little bit, well, not a little bit, apparently pornographic, right? It's actually rated TV 14 in the US, and it's available for streaming on Amazon Prime, Hulu, and yes, YouTube in the US. Now, everybody has their own personal tolerances for what's appropriate. I don't know if these same individuals have concerns with Bridgerton or Game of Thrones, I don't know, but this is what we're talking about, right? So if somebody says something like this, it sounds horrible. And then it takes a lot of time to actually dig into what are you talking about? And the underlying facts don't always, in my opinion, match up with the assertions. Now, there was 20 different things in that article that were being said, all of which are rebuttable. So at the end of this presentation, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. And I have a list of all of those things and all of the things that are fact-checking what those allegations are. But that's why this discussion is so important, because anybody can say anything at any time, right? And it's up to the people who are trying to talk about the public policy to really be responsible in their dialogue and conversation and what the facts actually are. And then you have your own personal opinions and make your own personal judgments, right? The other thing that I can talk about, again, I know we're running out of, or I'm past my 20 minutes. So I'll just make note of, there was also a press release or an announcement about some transparency stuff. Be happy to talk about that too after we're all done. So go on to the next slide. What's changing? This is the exciting stuff. This is the really good news, all right? What's changing? Rapid in-state investment program growth, launch of internal investment initiative, increased legacy fund earnings. I know I'm talking even faster than I did the first part, but I want to get through these things because they're actually really exciting, these things that are happening in North Dakota. And none of these things, well, that's not true. 2 of the 3 of these things really evolved in the last 3 years, and it's pretty exciting. So if we go on the next slide. Okay, this is from the Retirement Investment Office website. I even said source down here, and it's available on the in-state investment page. So the in-state investment program was created to invest a portion of the legacy fund in North Dakota specifically by legislation in 2021. Not that long ago. Since that time, I am very proud to say that North Dakota's in-state investment program is the largest per GDP in the US. It's amazing. This is a map by what we've been able to roll out. Match loans, which includes that Coal Creek, over $300 million. B&D infrastructure loans, providing infrastructure loans to communities within North Dakota, over $50 million. North Dakota Growth Fund, $89 million in private equity commitments. And you can see here the called capital is about $50 million. And what that means, when I say private equity commitments, this is really important. When the Growth Fund invests, It is never the primary or sole investor. It is always a minority investor. So that means that the growth fund investment might only be a couple million into the entity. But along with that came 3 or 4 other investors that are also investing millions in that entity. So this is just a fraction of what's being invested in North Dakota. It is very robust, it is very exciting, and if you have any questions about that, happy to answer them, but I'd also urge you to contact the agency. The North Dakota Growth Fund Generator is one of the investments and helps young, early stage businesses learn about how to grow their business and expand. There's a lot of resources out there, and this is different from what Commerce and B&D are doing specifically, so it's very exciting. Next slide. Internal Investment Initiative. I'm going to talk about the business case, and then I'm going to talk about the thing that excites me the most, which is actually not the business case, surprisingly enough. The Internal Investment Initiative sounds a little bit like in-state investing, but it's this idea that we currently, as of today, the state is using external managers to invest all the funds. Well, you got to pay those external managers fees, right? And you're paying those fees based upon your assets. So even if you negotiate a really, really low fee, as those assets grow, which they're supposed to do, the amount of money grows, right? But if you bring it in-house, and South Dakota has done this exceptionally well, if you bring it in-house, you can cap your internal costs, and that means those additional earnings will flow over to your client funds. So conservatively, we estimated when we brought the business case to the state legislature in the 2023 session, that if we were to bring 15% of those assets in-house, then we could save conservatively $16 million a year for our client funds. That's $16 million a year across all the client funds. The budget for the agency is less than $16 million. And that is net of all of the infrastructure costs, all of the FTE costs, all of those salaries for those really talented investment professionals. It's pretty exciting, and that number is only going to grow as the assets grow and as the amount that we're able to internally manage grows. Right now, we're in the final stages of setting up the infrastructure. I should say Rio's in the final stages of setting up the infrastructure to be able to do that trading internally. So that's our investment professionals, North Dakota investment professionals, doing the trading for our client funds up to 15%. Now, the most exciting thing for me personally out of this whole initiative is the third bullet point, expanding the community of investment professionals in North Dakota. I married a man from Dickinson, North Dakota. He has 3 brothers. My husband left when he was 18 and didn't come back until late 30s, early 40s, with me in tow, right, to move back home. All 3 of his brothers left. 2 of them are involved in finance because they were looking for other opportunities. One of them routinely says that North Dakota's greatest export is its people, because the opportunities aren't always here for our folks. We're changing that. This is one of the ways that we're changing that, and it's so exciting. I'm going to give you an example of 2 of my former coworkers. One of them is from Dickinson. We actually have a lot of folks who work at the Retirement Investment Office from Dickinson. No bias here, I'm just saying that we do, because they're very talented. So we have one individual who grew up here in Dickinson, got a full ride scholarship to college, left the state, went out, got into finance, was trading out in New York. He didn't like it out in New York. He wanted to come back home. He liked living in North Dakota. But can he do what he did in New York and North Dakota? Now he can. And he did. He moved back here for the job at the Retirement Investment Office. I have another accounting manager, or had another accounting manager. I got to be very mindful of my timing here, but accounting manager who moves around millions of dollars every single day. And you know what he does on nights and weekends? He works with his dad and his brother at the ranch. How cool is that? This last summer, we had our very first investment intern. It was a young man from UND who was a finance major, and he came and he got to learn at the shoulder to shoulder with seasoned investment professionals about institutional investing and the opportunities that opened up for him. And you know what he wants to do? Stay in North Dakota. What we're building here, this is just one of the many things North Dakota is doing, but we're building a community of investment professionals in North Dakota who are going to have experience in institutional investing, and then they're able to leave the agency and go and do other things and stay in North Dakota because they value living here, and they'll have the opportunity to do the things that they want to do professionally, but stay in North Dakota. That's the best part of this. Next slide, please. Last slide, what I've been promising you this whole time. Higher earnings lead to tax relief. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that $11 billion is a small amount of money. It's a large amount of money for anyone, right? However, comparatively speaking to other sovereign wealth funds within the United States, the legacy fund is in its infancy. It's very small, comparatively. The Alaska Permanent Fund, which gets raised a lot, it's $80 billion. The Alaska Permanent Fund, that's all from their website, the 5% draw that comes from that fund provides approximately 55% of Alaska's general fund revenue. So tax relief, what we're talking about, this is how this impacts you as an individual. If the legacy fund is allowed to be that goose that lays the golden eggs, if it's fed, if it's cared for, if it's allocated in a way that promotes returns, that increases returns, that come back to the legislature, and they're able to use those earnings to fund government and not rely, and Leader Lefor was just talking about that today, not rely on other tax income sources, and that directly translates into tax relief for each and every one of us. There is this session, Senate Bill 2151, that amends the legacy fund earnings stream, how the money gets put out, to create a bridge fund and a tax relief fund from legacy fund earnings. It's already starting to happen. Now, to be fair, tax relief was already part of the language of the legacy fund earnings stream, but it just said appropriated for the legislature to use for tax relief initiatives. It didn't dedicate it to a specific fund, and this creates a specific tax relief fund. So again, no opinion on this bill, just sharing with you that it's already starting to happen, and this is the way that each and every one of us benefit from healthy earnings from the legacy fund to allow it to grow and provide relief for our state so that we can live here, work here, and get the benefit of living in North Dakota. So with that, one of the benefits. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I really thank you for your time and listening to me today. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. This microphone's not tied into the room, but it's for you and it's for the consolidated audience. This is a deck of cards. I've got ace through 10 in clubs. That means I'm making time for at least 10 questions. I'll go hand in the air shortly if you'd like to ask a question. It's my way of putting you in line to ask a question without making you stand in a line. Okay? And I think it would, well, you've sat down. I was going to give you the first 3 questions. I'm still going to stick with that. If you have a question specifically for Jan Murtha, I think I would see those hands first. And then I'll go to questions to anyone else on the panel. I do see a hand there. Questions to Jan Murtha.
In the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion as far as the transparency of the legacy fund. I'd like to know how that's been addressed, or if you think it's gone far enough, or are there bills pending to further that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate it. Because I want you to know, standing here today, that the Legacy Fund, the State Investment Board, the Retirement Investment Office operates entirely within state law, all right? So there is no other state that gives out more information than North Dakota gives out. We, in fact, are one of the most transparent states. You heard of Florida being pretty transparent? Well, the North Dakota Open Records and Meetings Law was modeled after the Florida Open Records and Meetings Law, and there's actually more protections in Florida law for investment-related data than there is in North Dakota. North Dakota doesn't have as robust a structure. So when we talk about transparency, I completely understand as a taxpayer, as a resident, I want to know where all the money is, right? Here's an issue, and I'm going to use the in-state investment program with giving all that information out and putting it out into the public domain. The issue is this. So we have a high allocation to our in-state investment program. I think everybody in the room can probably agree it's a really good idea to invest in North Dakota. There are very limited public market opportunities in North Dakota. It's pretty much MDU. So when I say public market, I mean those businesses that you can buy stocks for that are traded on an exchange, right? That means if we're going to invest in North Dakota, we're going to be investing in private markets. Well, private markets are private. If you release too much information about those investments, you're actually harming the investment. Now, take, for example, your perspective as a small business owner, right? You're a small business owner, you're growing your business, it's yours, you haven't shared this information, and in fact, the Securities and Exchange Commission and regulation over the last several years have been encouraging businesses to stay private longer to grow their capital before they go public, right? So it's yours, and you decide to, okay, you're interested in taking on an investor. That means you're giving up part of that control to somebody else, right, to get that money. It's a very personal decision. You get that money, okay, so now you get that money, but what if the state's an investor? And now what if the whole world gets to know everything about your business because you took that money? That is going to affect how that business is valued when you later decide to sell it, when you're looking for more investors. It's going to negatively impact the value of your business, which is bad for you. It's also going to negatively impact the state's investment in you, right? Because if you're getting less value for your business, that means the state's getting a lower return, right? So I liken the example to this. If you're going to play in the sandbox, you got to play by the rules. If you get in there and start throwing sand in everybody's face, they're going to get out and go to a different sandbox. They're not going to want to play with you, right? So if we want to invest in North Dakota, if we want to get the benefit of higher returns by investing in private market, we have to play by the rules of private markets, which means there's information that we just can't share, because if we did, it would hurt the investment. That being said, investments are a public policy decision. The state could say, listen, we value transparency over returns, totally fine, totally appropriate. It's a public policy decision. We're only going to invest in U.S. government debt. We go back to that diversification conversation, right? So if we only do that, if we limit ourselves in that way, you're going to expect lower returns, which means lower earnings, which means less tax relief, which means the value goes down. So everybody has to decide, what is it that you want? Do you want those returns? Do you want those earnings? Do you want that tax relief? Do you want to be able to invest in North Dakota? If you do, great, we're going to invest in private markets. If the answer is no, I want to see everything, it's not that you're going to get to see all that private market information. It's that the state will have to divest from those private market investments, get out of there because they can't play by the rules. They can't abide by the rules. And again, I want to say there aren't any other states that are giving out this information either. So that's the answer to the transparency question. It's really a public policy decision.
My name's Chris Kaman. I'm with Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates. I don't really have a question today, just a simple statement, and that's thank you to our legislators. Because of your hard work, SCR 4014 passed unanimously the last session, and that no doubt played a pivotal role in the park abandoning their plans to eliminate the horses in April of 2024. While this legislative session is just beginning, I've been talking to many of you, specifically Representative Lefor, for the better part of 2024, brainstorming ways that we can make sure that we always have a healthy and viable herd of horses in TRMP. This session, we have two pieces of legislation that I believe will do just that. We're still fine-tuning a bill that's calling for the formation of a working group that's made up of stakeholders across the state that will come together with the National Park Service to find the best ways to manage the horses. And the second is a resolution asking for our federal legislators to enact much-needed federal protection for this herd, to give strength to the working group, and to help make sure the freedom of those wild horses is never threatened again. So with the help of Representative Lefor, Senator Kessel, Senator Rummel, and even Senator Brochet from all the way across the state in Fargo, along with continued talks with Senator Hoven's office, I'm hopeful that we are on the road to make sure that the wild horses always remain in Theodore Roosevelt National Park for future generations to enjoy, just as we do today. So thank you.
I'm going to be the troublemaker and ask two. I just moved here back in May, so I'm coming at this with fresh eyes, and I want to say this is a wonderful type of gathering. I hope to come here more, but I got two questions, and Carter's going to allow it. One question first is, I love the story regarding Cardinal Glass and how the ability to bring in so many people from outside of the United States has helped that business, and we know there's a lot of businesses that have that type of position. So do we have any discussion in the state legislature about how we will protect such immigrants should there become problems with the new administration, the federal level coming in? And my other question is regarding charter schools. I am a professor. I'm very in touch with education. I know that Some charter schools do not receive the same type of oversights as other types of schools, so that the quality of education may not be as high. And since I deal with them in college, I want to make sure I have students who are ready to engage with everything in college. So will the bill that you're introducing also be learning from the mistakes of the past from other places around the country to ensure that we have still high-quality education in this state?
I can talk about the charter school one first. I'm not bringing that bill, actually. It's coming from somewhere else. All that I know for sure is that the public and non-public schools all get certified by the Department of Public Instruction. So they determine whether they've got the right parameters set by DPI. But I haven't seen the bill yet, so I apologize for not knowing more about that. But I will take your point to heart and make sure that we're doing the right thing on the education piece of it, that they're up to snuff. On the other piece, Leader Lefor, do you have any information about immigration?
Yes, in the example I gave of Cardinal Glass, they actually get assistance from our congressional delegation, and now we want to increase that in terms of what we can help with in North Dakota to make sure that whatever visa is required or paperwork is required, and countries are different in what is what they require as well. So the idea is to help with what the federal, our congressional delegation is doing to enhance that, because what you'll have is, let's say Cardinal Glass or whatever company out there to say, look, we've got 2 or 3 individuals from Ukraine that would like to come into the country. Well, they would help to try and accelerate that so these people could move into North Dakota. So I feel pretty comfortable about the people that are working at this at the Department of Commerce. They're professionals. They work really hard to, in the last 2 years, they put it, no, not quite 2 years, but they put a lot of effort in building a platform or a plan to help with all of that. So.
Hi, my name is Linda Little, and I am a resident in just 2 miles outside of town. My current property is held in a trust, and I've not been able to take advantage of the tax credit. Can you help me with that?
Yes, I can. Senator Mark Weber, and I've co-sponsored on the bill, is providing legislation that gives that exact relief that you're talking about. Life estates, trusts, and things like that. We're going to try to move that as quickly as we can with an emergency clause so you can get the property tax credit.
I have a comment, maybe 2. My father in the 60s was a state auditor. He said every county in this state that he audited was corrupt. What do we have in processes to prevent all our funds from people pilfering them? Like a good example is Dickinson State University, the foundation. And here's a quote from Thomas Jefferson to end it. You put 150 lawyers in one room together and nothing good can come of it, because after all, these are people that get paid by the hour to talk.
I'll answer them. Just so you know, I'm not charging to be here today. This is totally free. I'm volunteering. In fact, I'm not even working for the state agency. I just like the opportunity to be able to share information. I love the opportunity to be able to serve North Dakota and the people in North Dakota. And I love the opportunity to be able to learn new things. That's why I keep jumping around, learning new things and serving North Dakota. So for as long as you let me, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be finding new and exciting ways to serve you. With that being said, excellent question on the auditing, or comment on the auditing. the Retirement Investment Office and the funds under its management are one of the most highly audited and regulated entities within the state of North Dakota. We not only are audited by external auditors, which are contracted with by the state auditor's office, because they said a long time ago, we want to make sure we have the technical expertise to really be digging in. So they do an RFP, the state auditor's office does, and goes out and finds external auditors to audit. We also have internal auditors. Not only do we have internal auditors, but as we were launching this internal investment initiative, we actually stood up and said, we need to be audited more. And we did a project to hire a consultant, which did a lot of auditing for institutional funds to come in and say, okay, here's where our program's at now. Where do we need to be? What type of additional, who asked for additional audits? The Retirement Investment Office did, right? The State Investment Board did. Said, what additional audits do we need to be able to make sure that everything is going appropriately? So we've contracted out our compliance monitoring is external. It's not even internal. So there's an external firm that does our compliance monitoring. We have the internal auditors, the external auditors, and because the people that we have in place aren't enough, there's not enough hours in the day to do all the audits we want to do, we also have we just issued a RFP for an auditor to do co-sourced audits. That means another firm coming in to do those internal audits that our internal auditors can't do. So that is so many levels of auditing and compliance, and we're very concerned about making sure that the public has confidence and trust in the work that's being done. We want those audits. We want those additional compliance regulations. It's extremely important. It has been to the board. It's extremely important to the agency. Very proud of the work that's being done. And if anybody says you should check into this, it gets checked into because this is a fiduciary agency. That means we have a higher level of responsibility to all of our client funds than just a regular state agency. So thank you for your comments.
My mother came here in 1948 from Germany. She was investigated by the CIE, which is now the CIA, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, the FBI, and I don't remember the fifth agency. We're letting people into this country that have not been investigated, that have not been vetted. Now, I'm not saying we investigate everybody with those 5 agencies, but we should investigate them somehow, some way.
I did want to acknowledge, now these folks did not need to be here, but we have elected leaders from the city and the county level who are present in the audience today, and we are grateful that you're here. Mayor Decker, and then Stark County Commissioner Messer and Claris are both in the room as well. They're paying attention, okay? I think it falls to me now to tie a bow on our session. We want you to know that the pattern for this series will be every other Saturday morning, moving forward January, February, and March. There was conversation earlier about our panelists and our legislators. When you call, they answer their phones. There's another group that answers their phone and someone in the room who deserves credit. Each time we meet in this series, we're aiming to have someone from each district and someone else. The someone else has been contacted by Rich Wardner. We are bringing in often a state government level speaker. We have one lined up for each and every series. And I give him credit for all the work he put during his time in the state legislature for many years. When Rich Wardner calls people statewide, they answer their phone because he has earned that trust. Let's give Rich Wardner a hand. I am biased, but I think the best way to keep up with what's going on in your community is to read your Chamber e-newsletter every Tuesday morning. So good ways to do that are to be employed by or to become a Chamber member or to send me an email, carter@dickinsonchamber.org. If you'd like that, it shows you what the Chamber has going on and what the community has going on. That will include future lineups for this series. I think that's all for today. We really appreciate you coming, and we will see you next time.